So even if they get it quite close and they calibrate it by putting an extra festival in, taking a day off of that every once in a while and so on, you still get inaccuracies in the calendar. So it wasn't until very, very late, just hundreds of years ago, we were able to do a calendar that's quite accurate. Alright, so back to the 360 days. They made it 365 days in Egypt. Then they divided each of the 12 months into 30 days exactly, and had 5 days left over, of course. You wouldn't want months of a different length like we have. And then they divided the day into 24 hours and the hour into 60 minutes. That came in Greek times and was based on Mesopotamian counting by 60. In fact, if you ever study astronomy, which I studied some of in college and have looked at a lot on my own, learned more on my own than I did in college about it, the skies are divided into 360 degrees. Each of those is divided into 60 minutes. So there's 1 degree swath of the sky, and it's got 60 minutes inside of it. And each one of the minutes is divided into 60 seconds. The Earth is constantly turning. You may not have ever thought of this. And those huge telescopes that have to focus on, like the Keck Observatory, or is that on Mount Wilson, or the Mount Wilson telescope, whatever, they have to move ever so slightly to keep looking at the star that they're looking at, and keep exactly on it as the Earth turns. It's like a watch that can't go tick, 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 but it has to kind of go tick, tick, tick. You can't have continuous motion. So there's always a teeny tiny consideration of imperfection in the image, because these telescopes are more than just a thing to look through. And you focus on the star and look at it, fine, but you want it to keep looking at that star. So wherever you focus it, it's a finely tuned watch. It's these massive telescopes are. And we still to this day use that 60 minutes and 60 seconds of every degree in astronomy and in timekeeping. And it's all based on the Babylonian counting of 60. It's a small world, and it's also a small time frame that we live in. We're connected quite intimately to the past. I mean, some people think there's a lot of people who aren't going to watch this series because, in fact, there are some people who still haven't watched the Greek series all of the way through, and they don't know that there are 1,000 little answers to 1,000 questions that they probably thought of when they were a kid. Why do we have 24 hours in the day? Why not 100 hours? Would that make more sense? Like a dollar's got 100 pennies? Let's have 100 hours in the day. Or hell, let's have 10 hours in the day. Why 24? And why 60 minutes in an hour? What? Well, you, ladies and gentlemen, have some answers to that. Some very early papyri show the Egyptians had considerable skill in surgery. And they also used magical spells to cure the ill. So they had magic and stuff too, but they actually did some surgery. In mathematics and other areas, on the other hand, Mesopotamia was far more advanced, and such a practical invention as wheeled vehicles was not used in Egypt until the time of the New Kingdom. Now it goes into the New Kingdom in detail, and it's kind of interesting, but I thought we can basically skip most of that. So we're going to go to page 111, and there's just a short paragraph here about a temple, the temple to Amen at Karnak, K-A-R-N-A-K. Just go Google that and get some pictures of the pillars. The pillars are absolutely enormous. 50 men can stand at the top of one of the capitals, on the very top of the pillar. 50 men could stand. Quite a large room if you put a ladder up there and had a restaurant up there, or say an elevator or something. But these are column after column after column in this temple, and massive, massive columns. I just want to make one quick note about them. The Egyptian architectural statements were not scaled to humans. They were scaled in a way that made humans absolutely minuscule. Look at the pyramids as one example, but this temple at Karnak, I think, is an even better example. The size of the The columns are 70 feet tall. Now that's a 6-story building. It's at least a 5-story building. They were doing this without an alphabet. But anyways, they had these architectural styles that dwarf humans and make them so small and minuscule that buildings are not therefore necessarily for humans, are they? The Greeks had an entirely different view of that. They built on scale and they decorated on a correct scale also. In the East you get these temples that aren't extremely huge. They're kind of like the Parthenon, maybe bigger than that. Some of them are rather large. But look at Angkor Wat, for example. A-N-K-O-R-W-A-T. Clear up 3-4 stories up above the ground level. The sides of the building are decorated with extremely intricate, fine wrought detail, so that you would have to get a ladder and go up there to be able to see it. You wouldn't be able to see it. Now, the Greeks would consider that absurd, because that's inappropriate to have decorations to look at in a place where you can't see them. Inappropriate. And the Egyptians, on the other hand, would look at that the same way the people in the East did. Those are like prayers to the gods. The walls at Karnak, the capitals and stuff, going clear up to the top of the capitals, finely wrought with all kinds of stories and stuff. The distance of 6 stories up above you on the stone are little stories and things that you can't read because you can't get up there. And that's fine, because they were messages to the gods. They were for the dead to read and stuff like that. Anyways, just want to stop for a second there and mention the difference between scaling architecture around the human being or trying to leave the human out of architecture as if the human were unimportant. And medieval cathedrals in Europe even did that. The fine decorations they had all over the damn things, way up where you couldn't see. Compared to the Greeks, which built on a human scale at all times and decorated for human considerations at all times. Okay, so that was an interesting bit there. Unlike the tombs of the greater kings, grave robbers never succeeded in looting the tomb of Tutankhamun. You've probably heard of this. They found the reason that they stopped making pyramids is because they were like a beacon. Come inside of me and get gold and silver and treasures and jewels and stuff. So almost all of those pyramids, almost every pyramid we've ever looked in, was robbed completely. Not every single one, but almost every one. Ingenious things. They'd drop a granite slab down in the hallway that goes to the tomb once they're done burying the king, and you can't get through the granite slab with anything that's not harder than granite on Mohs scale of hardness. So what they ended up doing was chiseling a tunnel around the granite slab through the limestone. They'd do anything to get in there. So they start burying them just out in the desert in what's called the Valley of the Kings. Tutankhamun, T-U-T-A, King Tut. Let's leave it at that. Oh, let's see. In the 1920s, Howard Carter and Lord Carnarvon had, I'm probably mispronouncing, Carnarvon, had the great fortune of discovering the tomb and carefully drew out its tremendous quantity of gold, inlaid furniture, I don't know what that is, it probably means there's cushions in it, and other luxuries. If a minor pharaoh was equipped with such wealth for the next world, one can hardly imagine what originally lay in the tomb chamber of the great conqueror, Thutmose III. Thutmose. Tutankhamun was not the most important pharaoh, but even so, he had a lot of nonsense in this little thing. Alright, now about the collapse of the Near East. At Amarna, A-M-A-R-N-A, excavators made a lucky find in 1887 of a mass of Egyptian state archives containing cuneiform tablets with letters from many kings, in which the foreign rulers call the Egyptian pharaoh their brother. They seek wives from his family, they dispatch their own women to his harem, and they urge that he, quote, send gold in a very great quantity, which cannot be counted. For in my brother's land gold is as common as dust. So they send gifts and stuff, and they want gold from the Egyptian king. The end result of this lengthy international rivalry was the weakening of all the major states in the Near East. Their monarchs failed to notice until too late that the new threats of invasion were mounting. From the desert, Semitic-speaking tribes moved in,